In August of '90, we got the call to go out. So we went out to, well, it was Desert Shield first, and we deployed to Desert Shield, and I was the air movement officer at the time, so I had to make sure everybody knew what plane they were getting on, what equipment was getting on what plane. So I was the last one to leave my unit. So we landed in Saudi Arabia, and I flew out in a C-5, and never felt like you were in a plane in that thing. You just, you never felt anything. So we landed, they opened the rear ramp, and it felt like I was walking into an oven. I was like, wow, this is... So we settled in, started doing missions, and I was in the operations center. So I chose the night shift. So I was a senior captain on the night shift for the operations center, and we had let's see, about 40 to 45 teams out in the area. Some were sitting on the border, Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. We had one team that was 300 miles across the border, and we had one team that was training Kuwaiti college students. And they formed a tank battalion from the Kuwaiti college students. So my job was to receive the reports from the teams at night, collate them in a briefing, and then brief the colonel in the morning. So it was pretty nice. I mean, pretty quiet. Nobody there to bother you. And so one night I was on the radio talking to one of the teams, and that was the team that was 300 miles across the border. So their job was to monitor Iraqi troop movements. So they called back saying that there was this little girl walking towards their position, and they felt they were going to be compromised, and they wanted input on what they should do. There's three options. You can shoot the girl. It's going to give you a position away, and then you're going to live with killing a child for the rest of your life. You can let it find you. So both those options are going to give your position away. So the third option is to get out. So we sent a helicopter to a location. So they moved out from that position, and we exfilled them on a helicopter. But that kind of thing happened a few times out there with those deep reconnaissance teams. So, and after that, we had the war started, the actual shooting part of the war started. So we had to coordinate between units. We had Syrian units, we had Qatarian units, we had Saudi units. We had to coordinate between them and American units that were on their flanks. So the teams were in there with the headquarters, and making sure that everybody knew where everybody was, so try to cut down any potential friendly fire, issues. So the most interesting one was Afghanistan, because our mission in Afghanistan, because we were a small team, was to work with Afghan units. So we were training, the Afghan army, which is basically what I've been trained to do on active duty. So this was 2007. So I was an advisor to an Afghan reconnaissance platoon. So there's about 100 of them, and myself and another American captain. So we would go to their barracks, work with them, do some training with them, and then we go out and do missions. And we were in an area of Afghanistan, it was almost on the northern border of Afghanistan. So one day we got a mission, because our group came under the command of the German headquarters. So we had Norwegians, Germans, Croatians, Latvians, Swedes, working in that area. So we went out, we were to go out and look for Taliban or collect information on Taliban. So we went to the villages in the area, and this was about a 12-hour drive from our base camp to where we were operating. We had no artillery support. We had no close air support. We were basically on our own, 7 Americans, 3 interpreters, and 100 Afghans. So we were out there, 2 Humvees, and a Ranger pickup, and then the Afghan vehicles. So after about 5 weeks of collecting information, we figured out exactly where the Taliban were holed up. So it was a little village called Teznawa, and we put together an operation with the other Americans that were working with an Afghan infantry company, and Norwegian snipers and Latvian snipers. And the Germans were to provide medical evacuation. So the snipers went into the mountains and overlooked the village, and they were reporting back activities in the village. We drove to the edge of the village, and 2.5 mile walk all uphill into the village with full combat gear. The recon company established what we call a cordon around the building that we knew they were in, so nobody could come in or out. And then the infantry company went in and captured the building. We captured 15 Taliban. 4 of them were on the top 10 most wanted list, and we had no friendly casualties. So once that was all done, the colonel showed up, patted everybody on the back and handed out medals, good job, all that. So we continued doing other missions, did some other missions. None had the same fantastic results, but still continued to work with them. And 2011, the Guard made me retire. So I went back into the civilian workplace until 2015, when I started collecting my retirement check from the military, and spending a year in Saudi Arabia as an advisor to the Saudi Army. So I joined the Legion as soon as I got back to Manchester, Post 2, Sweeney Post. Didn't know much about any of the other Legion posts in Manchester. I knew about this one, so I came here. Wasn't really, active in post activities, between kid activities and being a Boy Scout leader. I was pretty busy, but I was able to I started doing honor guard funerals with Sharkey Madden, who was the sergeant at arms back then. Then after I retired from the Guard, our adjutant, he wasn't adjutant yet, Bill Roy, convinced me to run for vice commander. So in 2012, I ran for senior vice, because there was no junior vice to move up into that position. And in 2013, I ran for commander.